From Heaven to Oblivion, The Afterlife According to Classic and Contemporary Literature. A visual essay by Aaron Adams. According to the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, beneath an individual's personal consciousness and subconscious lies a link to everyone who is now or has ever been alive. He called this concept the collective unconscious, and ascribed to it the existence of the archetypes and themes that are universal to all mankind. These themes include those of the hero, the mentor, the mother, the rite of passage, and countless more. These archetypes shape everything it means to be human. There is, however, a theme which overshadows all others with its prevalence over the lives of man. This theme is death. Death is the universal theme to end all universal themes. The vast majority of all creatures that have ever been alive are now dead, and this is a fact which cannot be ignored by our storytellers. From Homer to Shakespeare to Dickens to Rowling, death is meant to be a momentous step in a character's journey, but not always the final step. Indeed, while many of our world's greatest stories treat death as the very end of the line, several others take it one step further, opting to explore the afterlife and everything it means to the characters. This can be taken in several different directions. In many classics, the characters view the afterlife simply with the hope that they will make it into heaven, or else with the dread of going to hell. In more modern literature, life after death is viewed with more mystique. The question is not, where will I go, but rather, will I go anywhere at all? Furthermore, in both classic and contemporary literature, there exists an idea of ghosts, spirits who stay on Earth rather than go anywhere, due to unfinished business. With this outlook, the focus is usually on the death of other people, and the question becomes, can anybody stay right here? We will touch on all these categories, each in their own due time. First, however, it would perhaps be advisable to consider the works which deal heavily in death and yet make no mention of an afterlife. Examples of these include Lord of the Flies and, more recently, The Hunger Games. In these stories and ones like them, it can almost be said that the afterlife simply doesn't matter, and that's why no mention is made of it. When children are killing children, and in circumstances just as dire, it is the death themselves that matter. Spending very much time wondering what happens to the characters after they die would slow the pace of the stories, and move away from the drastic nature of the situations. In some cases, it might even devalue the sacrifice that is death itself, acting as though death is no big deal because it isn't permanent. Further, neglecting all mention of an afterlife will often add to the hopelessness and helplessness felt by a character in his or her everyday life. This is actually a strategy used in many totalitarian societies in real life. Suppressing or mandating a civilization's religious beliefs is extremely effective in causing citizens to submit to a tyrant's whims, as they believe there is nothing better in the entire universe for them. An example of such suppression can be seen in Orwell's Animal Farm, when Moses the Raven is banished by the pig leaders because of his tales of Sugar Candy Mountain, a sort of heaven for animals to look forward to. The animals were thenceforth disallowed to speak of Sugar Candy Mountain, because what was important was the farm and nothing else. Such attitudes are not always stated outright in these sorts of works, but the contextual unimportance of the afterlife is heavily implied. Stories in which characters actively, consciously go to heaven or hell are rare. In stories that take place in more religious times, such as The Scarlet Letter, the afterlife is more the subject of anxiety than a thing of any real substance. It is only in more mystical and fantastical stories that heaven and hell really come to life. The oldest and most famous examples of such stories include Dante's Divine Comedy and Homer's Odyssey. In both, the authors use the template of a quest to explore their own religious ideas about life after death. Both stories contain a concept of an underworld and a system of separating the souls on a basis of merit. But while Homer simply creates an isolated sanctuary for the heroes of the world and allows the rest of the souls to mingle, Dante takes it a step further by methodically assigning each and every possible human condition a place in heaven, purgatory, or hell. Rather than reward the extremely virtuous and leave the rest alone as Homer does, Dante decides that the vague promise of the Elysian fields is not nearly enough of an incentive to goad mankind into righteous ways. He finds the threat of divine punishment much more effective in shaping a man's behavior. These conflicting views on the afterlife directly represent the attitudes of the religious people alive at the time. The ancient Greeks were a realistic lot. They lauded heroes, but understood that, frankly, man was fallible and shouldn't have too much expected of him. The flawed, human-like Greek gods, with all their infidelity and pettiness, reflected this view. Nothing in life was perfect, so those who neared perfection ought to be rewarded, while those who lived normal or less than satisfactory lives could stay unharmed in the underworld proper. Alternatively, the Christianity of the early Italian Renaissance, the time of Dante, held mankind to a much higher standard. Because perfection had walked the earth in the form of Jesus Christ, man was now expected to emulate the Savior in all ways possible. Anything that was less than perfection was condemned. That's why Dante punishes simple human crimes such as lust and gluttony with such ferocity. Because the Christian God was meant to be perfect, so was mankind. Dante's view is somewhat challenged in the 1990 novel Good Omens, a collaborative work by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. This novel stars an angel and a demon who both live on Earth, each inspiring or tempting human beings toward the ways of good or evil. However, neither the angel nor the demon is particularly enthusiastic about his job, and as such they tend to spend most of their time hanging out together and having metaphysical conversations. In Good Omens, it is very much implied that there isn't much difference between good and evil at all, and that a man's behavior is his own business and not something to be judged or mandated very strictly by the divine. Although the main characters talk about winning human souls over for one side or another, when it comes down to brass tacks, a person's fate is very much in his own hands. Unlike the unfortunate souls of Dante's hell, no single act condemns a person to one place. It's all about the big picture. This theory of self-determination carries over into the next category of afterlives, that of mystique and mystery. Distinctly modern in nature, these stories do not view the heaven-hell scenario as the end-all be-all of the afterlife. It is one of many options, but in these stories the characters are less sure of their post-death destinations, and therefore the deads themselves are treated more as a thing of beauty and adventure. Two examples of this category include Suzanne Wayne's Reincarnation and Richard Bach's Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Both these stories handle the idea that we will each live several lives on Earth before we ever leave for good, so long as we accomplish a certain goal. The major difference is, in reincarnation, you have to accomplish the goal in order to end the cycle of lives, while in Seagull, you have to accomplish the goal in order to receive more lives. The goals in these two books are quite different. Reincarnation follows the story of several souls whose lives are intertwined, focusing on 4 souls in particular who are always caught in a violent love polygon. Always in the wrong place at the wrong time, the multiple lives of these souls always end violently, often at the hand of jealous lovers. It is in finding one another and staying with one another that the two destined couples fulfill their divine purpose. It is implied that the life in which they succeed will be their final life. Conversely, Bach's Seagull is the story of a gull that loves to fly and loves to learn. Jonathan is shunned by his flock for refusing to conform, but is accepted by a new flock that brings him to a higher plane of existence, a plane which seems to exempt him from any real death. Jonathan returns to his original flock and teaches those who are willing how to reach this higher plane. But it is heavily implied that there is no heaven, and that those who are unwilling to learn will die without meaning. These two views take heavy influence from Eastern religion, which has grown greatly in Western prevalence over the last several decades. Wayne's Reincarnation, for example, takes its premise directly from Buddhism and its idea of constant rebirth until the circle is broken and an individual reaches nirvana, a state of ultimate peace. While Seagull's idea of conditional immortality seems rather unique to Bach, his idea that wisdom and freedom ought to be our greatest goals is distinctly Buddhist in nature. Nearly every civilization has a concept of ghosts or spirits which walk the earth for one reason or another. For some, it is because the person did something wrong during life. Other times it is because something was done wrong to the person, and he cannot move on because of it. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, for example, King Hamlet is heinously murdered by his own brother, and because he died without his last rites, was forced to burn in purgatory during the day and wander the earth as a ghost at night. These kinds of ghosts hold true to our traditional view that ghosts are people with unfinished business that must stay on earth until that business is worked through. Similarly, there are ghosts that stay on earth to redeem themselves, such as Jacob Marley in Dickens's Christmas Carol. In this story, a man must be guilty of substantial greed and cruelty towards his fellow man to become a ghost, and then he is forced to wear the chains he forged in life, complete with full safes and heavy iron keys. Marley tells the main character, Ebenezer Scrooge, that normally, spirits can only watch the suffering of mankind, wishing to help but unable to do so. He implies that his only hope of redemption is to save Scrooge from this horrendous fate. This is a somewhat strange interpretation of the earthbound afterlife, because usually, if those in our country believe in intrusive spirits, we do not believe them to be in any way benevolent. If a spirit is to interfere with our lives, we expect them to harm us, as poltergeists do. In both these examples, the soul in question is forced to remain on Earth. It is a rare thing to find a ghost who is on Earth by choice. However, this is where J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter comes in. In this world, a man chooses whether or not he shall become a ghost. It is his decision and no one else's. While it is implied that the people who become ghosts tend to die in less than favorable situations, the series' most popular ghost, Sir Nicholas, reveals that the only people to become ghosts are those who are too afraid to risk the unknown afterlife. These spirits tend to hold on to whatever feelings they've been left with at the time of their death, and they are unable to move on in any way. Further, while we find out that the souls who decide to move on go on to a heaven-like state that is similar to whatever place that made that individual happiest in life, it is revealed that these souls can temporarily be called back to Earth through certain magic. Compared to the known Hogwarts ghosts, these souls are much more at peace, so long as they are assured that they will not be forced to stay on Earth for very long. Considering all options, Rowling's spirits seem to be the most stable of all ghosts, if no less tragic than their fellows. Obviously, no one, not even our greatest storytellers, knows what will happen to us after death. There could be a heaven, or there could be nothing at all. But, according to these works, if there is anything to look forward to after death, there are a few guidelines by which a person should live if they're hoping for something good to happen to them. Whether that something good is heaven, or nirvana, or even just a next life as a human rather than a cockroach, every civilization seems to agree on these guidelines. Be kind, be brave, be generous, seek wisdom, and seek love. It's really all we can do.